Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are stripping away the veneer of a story that I think a lot of people think they know.
The headline version.
Exactly. They know the headline. But we're going to dig into the details. We're going to London, specifically to a very quiet, very specialized street in the jewelry district over the Easter weekend of 2015.
A place called Hatton Garden.
And I want you to really picture the scene here because the atmosphere is just so important to this whole story. It's a bank holiday. The streets are empty.
Totally deserted.
All the businesses are shuttered. It's silent. But underneath the pavement, inside a reinforced concrete vault, there's a group of men working with industrial machinery to pull off what would eventually be called
The largest burglary in English legal history.
It's incredible. And it feels so cinematic.
Oh, completely. When the news first broke, the immediate reaction from everyone, the public, the press, was to script it. It had all the elements of a Hollywood blockbuster, right?
It's perfect. The impenetrable vault, the massive haul of gold and diamonds, the timing over a long weekend.
But as we dig into the reports, the police files, the court transcripts, what we find is that the reality is it's much grittier, it's much dirtier, and frankly, it's just much more interesting than any movie version.
Absolutely. And the headline everyone remembers, the big twist, was that aha moment. The moment when the police revealed that this wasn't some team of, acrobatic, cyber-savvy young thieves rappelling from the ceiling.
Yeah.
It was a group of elderly men, pensioners,
Oh.
men who were, and this is the best part, eligible for a bus pass.
The Diamond Geezers, as the press immediately dubbed them, and that nickname, it did a lot of heavy lifting.
It really did.
It created this image of sort of lovable rogues, a dad's army gone bad. It made them seem harmless, almost cute.
Right.
But part of our mission today in this deep dive is to really dismantle that myth. These weren't just bored grandfathers looking for a weekend hobby. They were career criminals. Serious, hardened men who had been involved in some of the most notorious crimes of the 20th century. This wasn't a whim for them. This was the culmination of a lifetime of organized crime.
We're absolutely going to get into the profiles of these men, and trust me, they are not characters you'd want to run into in a dark alley, regardless of their age. But we're also going to look at the mechanics.
The how.
The how. We've got the technical specs of the drill they used, this beast called the Hilti DD350. We're going to look at the police investigation and the the critical failure that allowed this heist to continue when it really should have been stopped cold on night one.
And we have to talk about the money.
Of course.
Because even today, years later, the vast majority of that loot, and we're talking millions upon millions of pounds worth of gold, jewelry, cash, it's still missing.
It just vanished.
It's this lingering mystery that just hangs over the entire case.
So let's start in the beginning, the setup. To understand why this heist happened, you first have to understand the location. Hatton Garden. For those who maybe haven't walked through London, can you paint a picture of this place?
Sure. Hatton Garden isn't just a street name, it's a mytonym. It stands for the entire UK diamond and jewelry trade. It's been the epicenter of that industry for centuries, really, since medieval times.
So this is old London.
Very. And if you walk down the street today, you see shop window after shop window just filled with engagement rings, watches, glittering jewels. But behind those retail fronts, there's this massive, unseen network of workshops and polishers and traders.
And crucially for this story...
And crucially, safe deposit facilities.
And the target was one of these, Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Ltd., located at 8890 Hatton Garden. Now, this was an underground facility. And I think we should probably clarify what a safe deposit box actually is, because in our age of, digital banking, it feels like a bit of an anachronism.
It really does. It feels like something from an old spy movie, but it serves a very specific purpose, and that purpose is anonymity.
Right.
When you put money in a bank, there's a digital trail. The bank knows, the government knows. A safe deposit box is essentially a physical void. You rent the box, you put your items inside, you take the key. The company renting you the box generally has no idea what's in there.
Which makes it perfect for legitimate valuables.
Yeah.
Family heirlooms, stamp collections, deeds to a property, that sort of thing.
Exactly. But, and this is a major factor in the psychology of this whole heist, it's also the perfect place for gray or even black assets.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you're hiding cash from the tax authorities or maybe hiding jewelry from an ex-spouse during a really bitter divorce, or if you're a criminal hiding the proceeds of other crimes,
You use a safe deposit box.
you use a safe deposit box.
And the thieves, they absolutely knew this. They were banking on it. There's this idea, isn't there, that robbing a safe deposit vault is almost the perfect crime because half the victims won't even report what was stolen from them.
It's the robber's fallacy. They assume that because some of the loot might be illicit, the police investigation will be hampered, that people won't come forward.
Oh, was that true here?
To an extent, there were certainly rumors and later some confirmations that other criminals lost a lot of money in this raid. But the reality is that many of the victims were small business owners.
Jewelers.
Independent jewelers, yeah. People who stored their entire stock in the vault over the long weekend because their own shop safes just weren't strong enough. This wasn't just pocket money for them, it was their livelihood.
So that's the target. A subterranean vault, deep under London, filled with untold millions. But the environment in the city that week was, well, it was chaotic. We have to talk about the Kingsway fire.
This is one of those details that just makes you question the nature of coincidence. It's almost too perfect.
So what happened?
On April 1st, 2015, that's April Fool's Day, and just 2 days before the heist began, a massive underground electrical fire breaks out in a place called Kingsway. Now, Kingsway is a major artery in central London. It's just a short walk from Hatton Garden.
And when you say fire, I think people might picture a trash can burning or something small.
Yeah.
This was infrastructure collapse.
This was subterranean chaos. An electrical fault deep in the tunnels under the road caused gas mains to rupture, and you had flames literally shooting out of manhole covers in the street.
Like geysers of fire.
Exactly. The smoke was toxic. It was thick. Thousands of people had to be evacuated from their offices. The West End theaters had to cancel performances because the power grid was so unstable. It shut down a huge section of the city.
And of course, when the heist was discovered a few days later, the immediate public theory was
the burglars started the fire.
it had to be them. It's the perfect diversion.
It makes perfect tactical sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you want to rob a vault, you want the police distracted, you want the fire brigade tied up, you want alarms to be drowned out by sirens, you want data and phone lines to be fried. It creates this perfect screen of confusion.
But the official investigation didn't support that theory, did it?
No. The London Fire Brigade did a full forensic analysis, and they ruled it an electrical fault. There was absolutely no sign of arson. It was just, London's aging Victorian infrastructure finally giving up the ghost at the worst possible time.
Or the best possible time, depending on your perspective.
Well, exactly. And here's the key point. Whether they started it or not is almost irrelevant. The fire acted as a massive force multiplier for the gang.
It was an incredible stroke of luck.
The luckiest break imaginable. It meant that all the emergency services were stretched to the breaking point. It meant the police were focused on crowd control and traffic management over in Kingsway. It meant that if some random alarm went off a few blocks away in a quiet street,
It's not top priority.
the fatigue factor for the response teams would be sky high. It provided this perfect cloak of noise and confusion right as the Easter weekend began.
So the stage is set. London is distracted by this fire. The city is emptying out for the holiday. It's Thursday, April 2nd. Why was Easter weekend so critical for their plan?
One word: time. That is the one resource a burglar usually lacks. In a typical smash and grab, you've got minutes. Maybe, if you're lucky, 10 minutes before the police response time catches up with you.
But Easter in the UK isn't just one day off.
No, it's a 4-day bank holiday. Good Friday is a public holiday. Easter Monday is a public holiday.
So all those businesses in Hatton Garden, they lock up on Thursday night.
And nobody is expected back at their desks until Tuesday morning.
Which is the crew.
A 96-hour window. 96 hours where they can make noise, where they can take breaks, where they can troubleshoot problems if something goes wrong. It completely changes the game. It turns a sprint into a marathon.
Okay, so let's walk through the timeline of the entry itself. It's Thursday evening. The clock ticks over to 9:1 p.m. The staff at the Safe Deposit Center lock the main doors.
They set the alarm, they head home for the long weekend.
And barely 4 minutes later, at 9:23 p.m., the operation begins.
It's that quick.
We see them on the CCTV footage. The man the press, later nicknamed Mr. Ginger, appears first. He lets himself in and descends into the vault area.
And then the rest of the team follows. And I have to bring up the equipment they were carrying because it's just such a strange detail.
They weren't carrying tactical duffel bags or anything like that.
No, they were dragging plastic wheelie bins, the kind you put your household trash in.
It looks absurd on the camera footage, these elderly men dragging garbage bins into a building.
It looks absurd, but from a logistical standpoint, it is absolutely brilliant. Think about it. If you're walking down a street in central London wearing a high-vis vest and dragging a bin, you are invisible.
You're a workman, a cleaner.
Nobody looks twice. And practically speaking, if you plan on stealing gold bars, what's the one thing you know about gold?
It's heavy.
It's incredibly heavy. You can't carry 1,000,000 pounds worth of gold in a backpack. You need wheels. You need something durable, something that won't attract attention. The bins were the perfect transport method, both for the tools on the way in and the loot on the way out.
So they get into the building, but they didn't break down the front door, did they?
No, there were no external signs of forced entry at all. They entered through a communal fire-escape door at the side of the building, which suggests they had done extensive reconnaissance, or, more likely, had some kind of inside knowledge.
Yeah, and from there.
From there, they made their way to the building's lift shaft. They disabled the lift on the second floor, forced the doors open, and then climbed down the lift shaft to get to the basement.
I mean, that's physically demanding. Climbing down a dark lift shaft is not easy for a 20-year-old, let alone a man in his 70s.
It requires upper body strength. It requires a certain amount of agility. And remember, they're not just climbing down themselves. They're carrying tools. They're lowering heavy equipment down. This really dispels that idea that they were frail old men. They might have been old, but they were physically capable.
Okay, so they're in the basement. They're standing in front of the vault. And this is where the Hilti DD350 enters the story.
Right. The vault door itself is a monster. I mean, it's designed to withstand explosives, thermal lances, you name it. A direct assault on the door would be pointless.
So they didn't even try.
They didn't even try. They attacked the wall next to the door.
The concrete wall.
The reinforced concrete wall. We're talking 1/2 meter thick. That's 20 inches of aggregate and steel rebar. It's basically the foundation of the building.
And to get through that, they brought the Hilti DD350. Let's geek out on this drill for a second. This is not something you buy at a hardware store for a weekend DIY project.
No, absolutely not. This is an industrial diamond coring drill. It's designed for major construction projects, you know, drilling huge holes for pipes through bridge foundations, that kind of thing. It uses a diamond-tipped circular bit that doesn't so much drill as grind the concrete into dust.
And it's not a handheld tool, is it?
No way. The torque would break your wrists. You have to bolt the rig itself to the wall or the floor to get the leverage you need. It also requires water cooling, so you have a hose constantly running water onto the bit to stop it from overheating.
Which creates a mess.
A huge mess. A slurry of wet concrete mud. It's incredibly loud. It vibrates the entire room. It's a brutal piece of machinery.
And the plan was to drill 3 holes, right?
Yes. 3 overlapping circular holes. If you can picture a Venn diagram or maybe the Audi logo, you drill 3 holes that are all touching each other, you knock out the centerpieces, and you're left with an opening.
How big?
Roughly 10 inches high and about 18 inches wide. Just enough for a skinny man to crawl through.
So they're down there in the dark, drilling, and this wasn't a quick process.
It took hours and hours. They were down there all through Thursday night. They were working into the early hours of Friday morning. And this is where the story takes a turn that just emphasizes their sheer persistence. They hit a snag.
The timeline shows they actually left the building and came back. Why?
Well, they managed to drill the holes. They created the opening in the wall. But the back of the vault was lined with this heavy cabinet of metal deposit boxes that was bolted to the floor and the ceiling. They couldn't push it over. The hole was blocked.
So they couldn't get through the hole they just made.
Exactly. They tried to use a hydraulic ram. It's a tool called a port-a-power to try and force the cabinet out of the way. But the ram broke.
The equipment failed on
The equipment failed. So just imagine that situation for a second. It's the middle of the night on Friday. You've broken in. You've drilled through a 20-inch wall. You are inches away from millions in gold. And you can't get in. Most burglars would panic and run at that point.
But they didn't.
They didn't. They packed up, they left the building, they went home, they sourced a new pump for the hydraulic ram. I mean, they essentially went shopping for replacement parts over the holiday weekend, and then they came back.
They came back to the scene of the crime.
They did. Mr. Ginger returned on Saturday, April 4th, with 2 others. They re-entered the building the same way, went back down the lift shaft, set up the new ram, and they finished the job.
The audacity of that is just staggering. To leave and then return a day later.
It speaks to their all-in mentality. This was their retirement fund. This was the one last job. They weren't going to let a broken bit of equipment stop them. But it also speaks to their absolute confidence that nobody was coming for them.
And that brings us to the most frustrating part of this entire deep dive.
The missed opportunity.
The alarm. Because listeners are probably screaming at their speakers right now. Didn't the drilling, the noise, the vibration, didn't that trigger a sensor?
It did. Let's rewind a bit. Go back to shortly after midnight on Friday, April 3rd. It's 12:21 a.m. The drilling causes enough vibration to trip the building's intruder alarm.
So the system worked.
The technology did its job perfectly. The signal went straight to Southern Monitoring Services, the private alarm company that was contracted to watch the building.
Okay.
They received the alert. They tried to contact the key holder for the building, but they got no answer. So, as per their procedure, they called the Metropolitan Police.
Hello, Scotland Yard. The alarm is going off at the giant vault full of diamonds.
Essentially, yes. They passed all the information to the police. The call was logged in the police computer-aided dispatch system, the CAD system. Everything was done by the book.
And the police sent a SWAT team. Right.
Right.
Or at least a patrol car to check it out.
They sent nothing.
Nothing.
Zero response.
Why? I mean, how is that even possible?
It comes down to a really mundane piece of bureaucracy, a grading system. The operator who took the call graded it as a grade N response.
Grade N.
Which stands for no response required.
No response required for an alarm going off at a major safe deposit vault in the jewelry district.
The reasoning that was given later was complex and, frankly, a bit of a mess. There was a policy in place at the time that said, unless the alarm company could actively verify that a crime was in progress, by seeing someone on CCTV or hearing voices on a microphone, the police wouldn't automatically attend every single alarm.
Because there are too many false alarms.
Exactly. But there's also a lot of evidence that the call was simply mishandled or at the very least deprioritized because of the massive workload from the Kingsway fire and it being a holiday weekend.
But the consequence of that one decision was total silence.
Total silence. And just think about the psychology of the thieves for a moment. They're in the vault. They know they've tricked the alarm. They must have heard the bell ringing upstairs. They freeze.
Waiting for the sirens.
They're waiting for the sirens. They're checking their watches. 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. No sirens. Nothing.
And that silence tells them one thing.
Nobody is coming.
It's the green light.
It's the green light. That failure to respond was everything. If a single patrol car had just driven by at 12:40 a.m. and shown a torch at the fire escape door, the gang would have fled. They would never have come back on Saturday with the replacement pump. That single grade N decision by one operator turned a failed break-in into a 14 million town catastrophe.
It really highlights the fragility of security, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You can have 20 inches of reinforced concrete and sophisticated sensors, but if the human being at the other end of the line presses the wrong button...
It's all completely worthless. It's the human factor, complacency. Oh, it's probably just a spider on the sensor. It's probably just a glitch from the power surges from the fire. Those little assumptions cost the victims everything.
So let's fast forward. The gang finishes the job over the weekend. They finally drive away for the last time at 6:10 a.m. on Sunday morning. Their wheelie bins now full of loot. The bank holiday finishes. Tuesday morning, April 7th, arrives.
And the world wakes up. The staff return to 8890 Hatton Garden. They open the doors, they go down to the vault, and they walk into a scene of absolute, total devastation.
The photos of the aftermath are just incredible to look at. The floor is covered in inches of concrete dust and debris. Safety deposit boxes have been ripped out of the wall. They've been angled ground open. Papers and empty jewelry boxes are just scattered everywhere.
It looked like a bomb had gone off. The staff, obviously horrified, call the police. And this time, the police do respond. And very, very quickly, they realize this isn't a job for the local beat cops. This gets kicked up immediately to the flying squad.
We hear that name a lot in British crime dramas, the flying squad. Who are they, for those who don't know?
They're the Sweeney. The name comes from Sweeney Todd, which is old Cockney rhyming slang for flying squad. They were the elite branch of the Met Police, and they are dedicated to tackling serious, organized crime, armed robbery, tiger kidnapping, high-value heists. If a bank gets robbed in London, the flying squad takes the case.
So these are the heavy hitters. But before they could even really lock down the investigation and get started, the media got involved. And this is where the public perception of the heist just got completely warped.
Yes. The Daily Mirror, a British tabloid, pulled off a massive scoop. On April 10th, that's just 3 days after the crime was even discovered, they somehow obtained CCTV footage from a camera on a nearby building that overlooked the fire escape.
They got it before the police released it.
Yes. The police were absolutely furious.
Right.
But the Mirror ran it on their front page, and because the footage was grainy and it was taken from a distance, you couldn't identify any of the faces. You could just see these indistinct figures in high-vis jackets moving bins in and out.
And the newspaper, in true tabloid fashion.
They gave them nicknames.
This is where the whole cast of characters was born.
Exactly. Mr. Ginger, because one of them appeared to have reddish hair. Mr. Strong, because he was seen carrying heavy bags. The Gent, because he wore smart shoes and a jacket. The Tall Man. And, of course, the Old Man.
It turned a crime into a caper. It fictionalized them instantly.
It did. It framed them as movie characters from the very beginning. And crucially, because they didn't look like threatening thugs in balaclavas, but rather like a bunch of ordinary workmen, the public didn't feel afraid of them.
They felt amused.
They felt amused. It seemed quaint. Look at these cheeky old guys pulling one over on the establishment.
And that narrative just stuck, didn't it? Even when the police finally released the official crime scene photos showing the sheer destruction inside the vault, the public was, in a strange way, still kind of rooting for the underdogs.
Which was a massive headache for the investigation. They had to pivot from hunting dangerous criminals to managing a media circus.
But the flying squad was working away in the background. And despite the very analog nature of the break-in, drills and wheelie bins, the investigation that caught them used cutting-edge digital forensics.
And that's the great irony of this case. The thieves won the analog battle. They beat the concrete. They beat the physical security. But they lost the digital war.
So what did the police do?
They used ANPR, that's automatic number plate recognition. They scanned thousands of hours of footage from cameras all around Hatton Garden, and they started tracking vehicles that were seen in the area over that weekend. They found a white Mercedes that was seen circling the block. They traced a Honda CR-V.
And once you have a license plate,
you have a name. And once you have a name, you start pulling phone records. You look at cell tower pings. They realized that even though the thieves had tried to be clever and left their main phones at home, they made mistakes. They used burner phones, but they turned them on in places that linked them to their real identities.
And then the police did something very old school.
They started listening.
Surveillance.
Covert surveillance. They identified the core suspects, men named Kenny Collins, Terry Perkins, Daniel Jones, and they managed to place listening devices bugs in their cars, specifically in Kenny Collins's white Mercedes and in Terry Perkins's Citroen.
And the transcripts from those bugs must have been gold dust for the prosecution. They weren't just discussing the weather, I assume.
They were bragging. They were arguing about how to split the money. They were discussing the drill, the problems they had. At one point, one of them is literally boasting about pulling off the biggest robbery in history. It was a full confession, captured on tape.
So on May 19th, 2015, about 6 weeks after the heist, the hammer finally drops.
The police execute a series of coordinated raids across London and Kent.
And they arrested 9 suspects. And as the mugshots started coming out, that Diamond Geezer's name was cemented forever because the ages were just shocking.
Truly.
Let's meet the crew, because we really need to dispel this idea that they were just some cute old men from the pub. Let's start with the man they call the mastermind, Brian Reeder.
Brian Reeder was 76 years old when he was arrested. The press called him the mastermind, or the old man. And the detail everyone loves is that he used his senior citizen freedom pass, his free bus pass, to travel to and from the scene of the crime.
Which saves him, what, £2.50
Yeah.
on a multi-million-pound heist?
It's comical, isn't it? But it's also smart. A bus pass doesn't leave a credit card trail. But Brian Reeder wasn't just some pensioner trying to supplement his state pension. He was a serious, heavy-duty criminal. He was a key lieutenant for a notorious gangster named Kenneth Noye.
Kenneth Noye. Now that's a serious name in the British underworld.
A very serious name. Noye was a key figure in the infamous Brinks-Mat robbery back in 1983. That was the 26 million con gold bullion heist near Heathrow that completely changed British policing. And Brian Reeder was right there. He was involved in laundering that gold. He had been a top-tier professional criminal for over 30 years.
So this truly was the one last job for him.
In the most literal sense, he was the elder statesman of the crew. Then you have Terry Perkins, who was 67 at the time. He was no slouch either. He'd been involved in the Security Express robbery, also in 1983, which at the time was the largest cash robbery in British history, £6 million. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison for that.
So these guys had spent decades of their lives in prison already. They knew exactly what the consequences were if they got caught.
They were institutionalized criminals. They didn't know another way of life. This wasn't a hobby for them. It was their profession. And then you had Daniel Jones, who was 60. He was described as being very eccentric, obsessed with the military. He used to sleep in a sleeping bag on the floor of his house, even though he had a bed. He was the one who was obsessed with the mechanics of the drill.
But there was one man who didn't quite fit the profile. The mystery man. The one the press called Basil.
Basil the ghost.
Okay.
Yes. In the CCTV footage, you see this one figure who is clearly trying to disguise himself. He's wearing a red wig. He keeps his face hidden. He seemed younger, more agile than the others. And crucially, he seemed to have the keys and the alarm codes to get into the building in the first place.
The inside man.
Potentially. And when the raids happened in May, Basil wasn't there.
He vanished.
He vanished. The police arrested everyone else in the core group, but they couldn't find Basil. He stayed free for 3 years.
3 years. So he actually got away with it for a while.
He did. It wasn't until March 2018 that the police finally tracked him down. His real name was Michael Seed. He was an alarm specialist, an electronics expert. He lived a very quiet, unassuming life in Islington, North London. When they finally raided his flat, they found jewelry, gold ingots, and a whole load of electronic equipment used for jamming and bypassing alarms.
Finding him closed the final chapter on the crew itself. But it doesn't close the book on the most important part of the story, does it? The loot.
This is the part that still stings for the victims and for the police. The police estimate that the gang stole approximately $14 million worth of goods.
14 million.
And that's the 2015 valuation. In today's money, when you factor in inflation and the significant rise in gold prices since then, that figure is much closer to 20 million.
That is a staggering amount of wealth.
It is. But of that amount, only about 4.3 million was ever recovered.
So wait, you're saying roughly 10 million pounds sterling is still missing?
Gone. Vanished into thin air.
Where? I mean, how do you hide 10 million worth of gold and diamonds?
Well, that is the multi-million-pound question, isn't it? Some of it was recovered in a very strange place, a cemetery. Daniel Jones, one of the ringleaders, led the police to a stash he had buried under a family memorial stone in Edmonton Cemetery.
Bizarre.
Very. But that was only a fraction of the total haul. The rest. It's highly likely it was broken down and moved on very, very quickly after the heist. Gold can be melted down into untraceable bars. Diamonds can be popped out of their settings and recut. Once you remove the identifying marks, gold is just element 79 on the periodic table. It's untraceable.
It's still hidden somewhere.
That's the other great speculation. Is there a stash of gold buried in a field somewhere in Kent? Is there a bag of diamonds bricked up in a wall of a house somewhere in London? Or did they sell it all to an international fence for pennies on the pound just to get rid of it quickly? We may never know for sure.
Let's talk about the consequences for the men who were caught. The sentencing. Because the law came down very hard on them, not just with prison time, but with huge financial penalties.
That's right. In March 2016, the main crew was sentenced. Brian Reeder, the oldest, got 6 years and 3 months. Collins, Jones, and Perkins all got 7 years each.
Now, to a listener, 7 years for a 14 million pound robbery might sound a bit light.
It does on the surface, but under English law, burglary is technically a non-violent crime. They didn't use guns, they didn't threaten anyone directly, so the sentencing guidelines put a cap on how long they can serve for that specific offense. However, the legal system has a very nasty sting in its tail. It's called the Proceeds of Crime Act, or POCA.
Explain how that works.
POCA is a piece of legislation specifically designed to stop criminals from profiting from their crimes. The court basically does a calculation. They say, right, we know you stole 14 million pounds. We've only managed to find 4 million pounds. Therefore, you are hiding 10 million pounds. You are now jointly liable to pay that back to the state.
And if they don't pay, or can't pay,
their prison sentences are extended significantly. In January 2018, the court ordered the ringleaders to pay back a combined 27.5 million. That massive figure includes the stolen value plus punitive interest and legal costs.
And they didn't have it.
Or at least they refused to give it up. T. Perkins, the career criminal, he died in his prison cell at HMP Belmarsh in February 2018, just 1 week after that ruling was made. He was 69 years old. He died bankrupt, owing millions to the state.
That is such a grim image. Dying in a concrete cell, broke, after pulling off what everyone called the heist of the century.
It completely strips away the romance of it, doesn't it?
Okay.
Daniel Jones and Kenny Collins also failed to pay their share, so they each had nearly 7 years added to their sentences.
So a 7-year sentence suddenly becomes a 14-year sentence. For a man in his 70s, that is effectively a life sentence.
It is. The government played hardball. They basically said, if you are hiding that gold for your family or for when you eventually get out, we will make absolutely sure you never live to enjoy it. It turned the tactical victory of the heist into a total, crushing strategic defeat.
And Michael Seed, Basil the Ghost.
He was sentenced much later, in 2019, after he was caught. He got 10 years for burglary and 8 for conspiracy to run concurrently. And then, a year later, he was also hit with a £6 million repayment order under POCA.
It's just such a tragedy of waste, really. Human potential, ingenuity, all wasted on crime. Decades of their lives wasted in prison. And all that wealth stolen from people who had worked for it.
And we absolutely have to address the victimless crime myth here, because the movies and the media coverage often portray this as just sticking it to the man, but the victims were real people.
They were small business owners.
They were independent jewelers. Many of them were uninsured or underinsured, because the premiums for jewelry stock in Hatton Garden are just astronomical. For many of them, losing their stock meant losing their livelihood, their business, their life's work. Some people lost irreplaceable heirlooms that had sentimental value you can't put a price on. The gang didn't just steal metal and stones, they stole people's security and their past.
Yet, despite that reality, the cultural impact was massive. Within a few years, we had, 3 movies? The Hatton Garden Job, King of Thieves with Michael Caine, and a big ITV television series.
There's a deep fascination with heists. It's the ingenuity, I think. We can't help but admire the planning, the sheer mechanics of the drill, the audacity of the timeline, and then seeing legendary actors like Michael Caine and Ray Winstone play these parts. It reinforced that sense of nostalgia. It connected this very modern crime back to some mythical good old days of British villainy.
But the reality, as we've discussed, was far less charming. It was dusty, it was dirty, it was physically exhausting, and ultimately it was desperate.
And futile, utterly futile. They did all that work, took all that risk, and in the end, they ended up with nothing but a prison cell, a huge debt to the government, and a legacy of ruin.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the big takeaway for you? How should we really remember the Hatton Garden heist?
I think it stands as this perfect collision between two different worlds. You had the analog world of the 20th century criminal, the heavy drill, the wheelie bin, the reliance on silence and time going up against the digital world of 21st century policing.
The old school versus the new school.
Exactly. The gang won the battle in the vault because they understood concrete and mechanics and persistence, but they lost the war because they didn't understand data. They were dinosaurs in a digital age. They didn't grasp how ANPR, cell site analysis, and covert listening devices would create a web they couldn't escape from. And that is ultimately what caught them.
And it leaves us with that one final tantalizing question that we've touched on. The missing millions.
And the ghost money.
Is it gone forever? Melted down, recut, scattered to the winds? Or is it still out there somewhere?
It's a provocative thought to end on, isn't it? If you're walking your dog through a field in the English countryside, or you're renovating an old house in North London, and you pull up the floorboards, are you standing on top of the Hatton Garden loot?
A fortune just waiting to be found. But a fortune that, as we've seen, came with a very, very high price.
Indeed.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the London Underground. It's a story that proves that sometimes the truth isn't just stranger than fiction, it's a whole lot grittier too.
Until next time.
See you then.